Most people can sense when something looks wrong, but struggle to name why. And this is a problem because houses are expensive to build, renovate, and fix. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through common facade design mistakes that can disrupt an otherwise beautiful looking home and what we could be doing instead. These aren't superficial tips like repainting the walls or adding more windows. They're timeless architectural principles, so whether you're building, renovating, or simply collecting ideas for your future dream house, by the end of this video, you'll understand what makes a house look great and feel great, and hopefully how to create one you won't regret. This pattern is very nice on the floor. When you put the same pattern of stonework on a vertical surface like the wall of your house, it looks off. It breaks several pragmatic rules that stonemasons have followed for centuries to make walls strong, stable, and visually convincing. Real stone walls almost always have noticeably bigger, more regular stones at the corners. They tie the walls together and take the highest stress. And really thin mosaic or crazy paving veneer usually uses the same small irregular pieces all the way to the corner, so the edge looks weak and unfinished. Even in random rubble, masons try to keep the tops of stones fairly level so the next layer sits solidly. Extreme paving patterns often have stones pointing in every direction, with no sense of horizontal coursing, which makes a wall feel like it could fall apart. Most of us are not stonemasons, but we can still sense when these principles are missing because the wall just doesn't look right. So now, before you start cladding your entire facade in stone, make sure you pick ones that will look authentic and structurally sound. Pre-made corner pieces that wrap around the edge, a visual sense of horizontal coursing rather than garden flooring on your wall. So when you're building with masonry, you can't just punch a hole in the wall and hope the bricks above magically stay put. You have to bridge that gap with either a lintel or an arch. Without one, the bricks above the opening are basically pretending to hold themselves up. Let me show you 3 wrong ways of doing this. So the first is a lintel or soldier course that stops exactly at the edge of the opening. A real one would need to rest on the walls on both sides. The second is a lintel that's way too thin for the weight that's sitting on it. The third, and the one I actually see most often, is when the brickwork simply continues straight across the top of the opening. The bricks look like they've just been stuck on like wallpaper. I mean, I understand that nowadays it's possible to use steel angle, so you don't need any long piece of structure to span the opening, but it's a modern solution in hiding behind a traditional material, and it just doesn't look as beautiful and correct to us. So instead of these, I think we can just detail it in a way that shows how the load would actually get around the opening. I mean, allow the structure above the opening to be the proper width so it can sit on the wall at both ends. Use an arch, a soldier course, or a flat arch. Basically anything that reads as a solution to the problem of an opening collapsing onto itself. Look at these 2 houses. The top one has horizontal windows that are wider than they are tall. The whole facade looks a bit tired and sunken, whereas in the bottom house, the building just looks more alert and composed. And the same principle appears one level down. Squat horizontal paints tend to look heavy and wrong, whereas vertically proportioned paints look more natural. For most of history, it was difficult to span a wide opening in masonry, so tall, narrow windows became the norm. But there's also a human reason. A vertical opening is closer to the proportion of a standing person. I mean, we are upright creatures, and we read upright forms as more alert. I mean, it's not an absolute rule, because there are some really beautiful, cool buildings of all ages that use lower, longer openings successfully. So I would say that unless it's a really intentional choice of having very wide horizontal openings, default to vertical. It just looks more visually pleasing to us. And when a room genuinely needs a wide opening, just subdivide it vertically so your eye reads it as a rhythm of upright elements rather than one long horizontal slot. Glazing bars originally weren't a style choice. Glass came in small pieces, so windows were made of small pieces. And making a big flat sheet of glass was, for most of history, essentially impossible. And when we finally solved the manufacturing problem and ripped the bars out, 2 important things disappeared. The first is scale. The bars give your eye a unit of measurement that helps it understand the size of everything else. The second is shadow. A projecting mountain catches the light and throws a fine line across the glass, so the window reads as an assembled object with depth. Of course, none of this applies to a house like this. This is a piece of architecture that's deliberately interrogating what a house even is, what the material can be made to do. Putting a lot of small panes into a building like this would obviously make it less elegant and ruin the design. But as beautiful as this design is, almost nobody lives in a house like this. Most people live in houses that look like this, and this house is not making a statement about material technology. Its windows are large blank sheets because that was the default option on the supplier list. So the question isn't, must all windows have glazing bars? It's, would this house look better with them? And very often, in the very ordinary houses that most of us actually live in, the answer is yes. Let me show you how powerful a tiny change can be. I'm going to take this wall and move the window back by a few inches, and the house is just going to look much, much lovelier. A traditional wall was thick, the window sat back inside it, and that setback, the reveal, throws a shadow line around every opening. Shadow means depth, depth means mass. Mass means this thing is really well built and it's very permanent. And when the window is mounted flush with the outside, there is no shadow. The eye downgrades the entire wall from really, really thick, solid construction to something thin and simple and surface. I'm reminded of this sketch I saw by Leon Cryer in his book, Drawings for Architecture. There's a sketch in it called Distance and Detail. He compares two types of buildings, and the simple one basically looks the same at any scale, whereas the more traditional classical one reveals more intricate details as you get closer. So there's always something new you discover and see. So I guess what I'm really trying to say in a very long-winded way is that the details in historic buildings that originally came from necessity often ended up being genuinely really, really beautiful. They give our eyes interesting things to rest on, and the subtle complexity feels really, really satisfying to us. So before we default to building plain boxes with more boxes for roofs and more simple boxes for windows, it's definitely worth pausing and asking ourselves, is this an intentional choice that actually makes a home look and feel better? If you watch my content for a while, you'll know that last year around this time was when I took my first sponsorship deal with Skillshare, and I'm really, really happy to be sponsored by them again for today's video. Let me tell you, building this YouTube channel has not been a straightforward process. For around 3 to 4 years, no one was watching my channel. I had to suppress so much self-doubt, and every video that underperforms, every critical comment that somehow outweighs 100 encouraging ones, the self-doubt creeps in. If anything, it just gets even louder. So for those of you who are not always very happy with the content I'm making and are very vocal about it, joke's on you, because no one is more critical of me than I am to myself, and I know exactly what to say to make myself cry. So this is why I recently took a class called Creative Confidence, Learn to Overcome the Critical Voice by Lucy Lambrooks. In the class, Lucy explains that your inner critic isn't actually trying to sabotage you, it's just trying to protect you. But the problem is that at least my inner critic often uses super harsh methods. In the class, she walks you through really simple practical exercises to kind of help understand where that voice is coming from, turn down the volume, and try to work with it rather than against it. So one thing that really stuck with me is learning to be a little bit more kind to myself when I'm in the process of making something, whether it's a video or helping a client design their house. I don't think the critical voice will ever go away. Now I have at least some tools to make it a little bit less mean and more useful. So Skillshare is not only a great place to learn creative skills from world-class professionals, illustrators, graphic designers, but also, importantly, it's a great place to learn from real people like Lucy, who delivered her class in such a sensitive, empathetic, and sometimes oddly funny, human kind of way. So whether you want to improve your creative confidence, pick up a new hobby, or just learn something new from humans instead of the algorithm, give Skillshare a try. The first 500 people to use my link in the description below or scan the QR code that's on the screen will get 1 month free. When a small gable is added above a window whose head sits well below the actual eaves of the roof, the gable doesn't need to be there. A purposeless gable adds complexity without contributing to the building's order or function. Good architecture removes elements that don't earn their place. Use gables only where they belong, over openings that genuinely sit inside the roof plane. The windows can be the right size and shape, but still ruin the composition and how your facade looks, because the gaps between them are as much part of the design as the windows are. If you want to quickly test if you have enough spacing between your windows, just imagine folding back a pair of shutters on either side of every window. If you're imagining shutters would overlap with their neighbors, then the windows might be too close together. This idea comes from this book, How to Get Your House Right, by Marianne Cusato. It's a very comprehensive guide for how to build a traditionally beautiful house. Usually I leave book recommendations that's related to the video topic I'm making in the YouTube description below. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the previous video because people often ask me what books I'm reading, but you know, it is there in the description. Can you see what's wrong with this house? When you have a facade like this, you give the feeling that the building is sagging a little bit in the middle. On a well-composed facade, the openings are tied together by regulating lines, invisible lines that the tops and bottoms align on, and that relate back to the shape of the building. One of the most important regulating lines is usually the head height, the top line of the openings. Very often, doors are slightly shorter than windows, which is perfectly acceptable. But if you want to correct this, you could also add a panel or transom above the door to help maintain this line. It will correct this visual sag. This is a view from a sofa with two different types of windows. The windowsill is also your eye line from the sofa. If you set it low enough, you will be able to see the garden, the street, the sky, the weather. If you cut it too high, you also cut off half the view. So look at all the windows in your building. Do they really need to be that high? In your living room, in your dining room, in the office, rooms where people literally spend hours every day, could you bring the windows down a little bit more? Here are two house elevations. Both are perfectly symmetrical, but one of them feels more like the main facade and the other one is more like a side facade. In a symmetrical facade, there are basically two ways the design can work. You can have an even number of openings, or you can have an odd number of openings. In an even number of openings, you create two equal or competing centers, because no opening is more important than its neighbor. When you have an odd number of openings, one opening lands right in the middle, and the eye is naturally drawn straight into it, and it generally feels a bit more resolved, more like the main facade, because it's just more visually obvious what is important. That's why almost every good traditional main facade uses an odd number of bays. An even number isn't wrong, it's just much better reserved for side and secondary elevations. If you run a string course, which is a horizontal band to define building levels, exactly in the middle of a two-story house, then both floors read as equal in height. This creates vertical duality and makes the facade feel quite static. But if you raise the string course slightly, then the ground floor becomes more dominant and the composition then gains a clearer hierarchy. I mean, it totally makes sense. The ground floor is where the public rooms and the entrance are, so letting it read as the more important floor actually matches how the house really works. So let the ground floor be taller. Raise the string course above the halfway line and let the wall get simpler and lighter as it rises. Let's take a moment to look at these two really different houses. Imagine you are visiting them for the first time. One has a really obvious entrance and the other doesn't. For sure, at least for me, I would feel more at ease walking up to this house where I can see exactly where the front door is. I can just imagine people standing on the steps, waving at me, saying, "Oh, hello BaiXu, lovely to have you here. We're so excited to spend time with you. We love you." Whereas the other one feels really inward looking and somehow it's just more cut off from the public part. That's probably the design intention, but it's definitely not, I find, the most welcoming, the most comfortable and the most feel-good house facade. When we're walking towards any building, we're already trying to figure out how to plot our route, which paths to take to get there. I mean, we've all been first-time visitors to someone's house, a public building, a shop, and walking up like a really lost tourist, not knowing where to go. This kind of mental friction is quite annoying. Like in this example, you would think that the entrance would be this really, really big shape in the middle, but you would be wrong. It's actually this door. So place your door where it's visible from the main line of approach. Give it a bold shape that stands out in front of the building, project it, raise a building around it, or both. I think a really timeless facade should be user-friendly. You should be able to spot immediately where the front door is. If you choose to use round classical columns on your facade, the most elegant and beautiful ones aren't perfectly straight. They have a subtle curve, a gentle swelling in the middle that corrects an optical illusion, because otherwise they would look a bit concave. And because of this, an identical column on the upper floor actually reads as visually heavier than the one below. So even though the dimensions are the same, the composition then still ends up feeling very top-heavy. And this is why having columns, if they are round classical ones, with this slightly curved shape is actually wrong. So to make sure the house you're building doesn't make this mistake, remember that the lower floor must always read as heavier and stronger. And you want to make the ground floor columns chunkier and more substantial than the ones above. Align all the columns on a single center line, and the base diameter of the upper column should correspond to the neck diameter of the column that's directly beneath it. Too often, people treat the side elevations as an afterthought. But when the sidewall is left completely blank, it creates problems both inside and out. When you're inside, rooms along that blank wall only get light from one direction. Rooms lit from only one side feels noticeably less pleasant than rooms with light from multiple sides, and are often avoided by the people who live there if there is a better lit room available. You also lose cross ventilation, which makes the space feel stuffy and uncomfortable. Outside, a blank wall removes what Jane Jacob calls eyes on the street, windows that provide that gentle, passive surveillance that makes neighborhoods feel safer and more visually connected. So if you can, don't leave any visible elevation blank. Treat every side of the house that can be seen from the street or neighboring properties as important. If privacy is concerned, use higher windows, obscured glass, or smart placement rather than sealing the wall off completely. Because when you give the side elevations a little love, the rooms become more pleasant to spend time in, the street feels safer, and the building itself looks more thoughtful instead of defensive. So there you have it, a few common facade mistakes that make houses so much worse than they could be, and some suggestions about what to do instead. I think when it comes to our homes, architecture shouldn't really be about building the biggest or most different or trendy looking house. It's more important to create a space that feels good to live in and also really visually beautiful to look at. For you, for your neighbors, for the next owner, for your children. And if you enjoyed the content of this video, you might want to watch these topics next.